In this 4-minute video, Orthodox Muslim claims that he's giving a thorough, scholarly rebuttal to the Islamic Dilemma. Let's see how thorough and scholarly this really is.
The Islamic Dilemma. The critics claim the Quran trips over itself by affirming the Gospel and the Torah as having divine origins, yet dares to disagree with them. Shocking, right? Their argument boils down to this. The Quran should mirror the Bible word for word, as if its sole purpose is to act like a celestial photocopy. Here's a reality check. It doesn't because it wasn't meant to.
That's a straw man. No one is saying that the Quran has to copy the Bible word for word. The issue is that the Quran repeatedly claims to confirm the Torah and the Gospel, the actual scriptures people had. But those same scriptures teach what Islam denies. The Torah calls God Father. The Gospels claim that Jesus is the Son of God, and that his crucifixion and resurrection all were historical events. The Quran denies all of that. That's the real dilemma. Confirming a book means agreeing with it, not contradicting at its core. So how does Orthodox Muslim reconcile this blatant contradiction?
The Quran's confirmation of earlier scriptures is general, not an absolute confirmation. Think of it like a city map. It shows you the main roads, landmarks, and neighborhoods, but it's not flawless. Some street names might be outdated, a few alleys might be missing, and the scale could be off. It's still useful, but you'd be foolish to treat it as gospel. No pun intended. The Quran takes a similar stance. It affirms the divine origin of previous scriptures while correcting distortions and omissions introduced by human hands. The Quran makes this crystal clear in chapter 5, verse 48, describing itself as both a confirmation and a criterion over previous texts.
This map analogy is just hilariously bad. This isn't about a few outdated street names. The Gospel and the Quran aren't even in the same city. They don't match on the subject of God's nature, Jesus' identity, the cross, salvation, how many wives you can have, how to treat your enemies, and much more. This isn't a scale issue, it's a different map entirely. And yet, the Quran calls the Torah and Gospel guidance and light. It says that it confirms them over and over, and insists that no one can change God's words. So if Allah's past revelations could get distorted, why exactly are we trusting the Quran, not losing a few districts too? Especially when your own sources admit serious preservation problems. The Uthmanic recension burned rival Qurans. Aisha said that sheep ate verses about stoning and breastfeeding. Ibn Musad's Mushaf lacked entire surahs, and Surah 33 supposedly shrank from over 200 verses to 73. As for 548's Al-Muhaymin, classical tafsir like Kuturbi, Tabari, Bagawi define it as witness, preserver, confirmer, trustworthy. Not once is corrector. You're rewriting the Arabic to dodge contradictions. That's why Quran 543 tells Jews to judge by the Torah that they had, and 547 tells Christians to judge by their gospel. The Quran's role as guardian is about upholding them, not rewriting them. You don't guard a text by letting it get corrupted or contradicting it. And let's not forget Surah 285, where Allah condemns cherry-picking scripture. Do you believe in part of the book and disbelieve in part? Yet your defense is exactly that. We're only confirming the good parts. That is exactly the hypocrisy that Quran 285 rebukes.
To call this a contradiction is to completely misunderstand its purpose and separate the author from his own text. Now let's look at a few examples of what critics mistakenly label as contradictions, but are actually deliberate corrections. The Gospels treat the crucifixion and resurrection as its centerpiece, the foundation of Christian theology. The Quran, however, takes a sledgehammer to that foundation. In chapter 4, verse 157, it flat out denies the crucifixion, stating that it was a mere appearance. The author of the Quran, whoever you may believe him to be, is clearly very aware of the content of the Gospels, that they teach a crucified Christ. If you mean to tell me the author of the Quran believed and confirmed every letter in the Torah and Gospel, and yet mistakenly contradicted them by denying a crucifixion, you would have to be lying to yourself.
Calling the Quran's crucifixion denial a deliberate correction ignores the real historical backdrop. 7th century Arabia was a theological bazaar. Nestorians, Monophysites, Gnostics, and fringe Jewish sects all passed through Mecca's trade routes. One rumor came straight from docetic texts like the Coptic Gospel of Peter and the second treatise of the Great Seth. It only appeared like Jesus died. Muhammad called himself the unlettered prophet. That's in the Quran. He never read the Gospels. He relied on secondhand stories. That's why he thought that the Trinity was Allah, Jesus, and Mary. That's why he claimed that Jews worshipped Ezra as the Son of God, and insisted that Jesus foretold his coming and parroted the whole no crucifixion tale. In reality, he believed he was confirming prior revelation, but was really working off garbled street theology and his own delusions of grandeur. The contradictions aren't deliberate corrections, they're just the byproduct of oral hearsay and religious narcissism passed off as revelation. So when he repeated the no crucifixion story, he stumbled into a contradiction, not correction.
In Genesis chapter 22, Abraham lies to his son, Isaac, claiming that they're off to sacrifice an animal. But in chapter 37, verse 102 of the Quran flips the script. Abraham is honest, informing his son of God's command to sacrifice him. Why? Because in the Quranic worldview, prophets don't lie. This is no error. It's not a contradiction. It's a correction of what the Quran sees as a flawed portrayal. Again, the Quran here is given a direct refutation to the biblical tradition. The author cannot have believed the Torah and the Gospel to be true in the absolute sense, while explicitly opposing it directly.
This whole claim that the Quran rewrites Genesis 22 because prophets don't lie is simply false. In Quran 21:63, Abraham smashes the idols, then says the big one did it, ask him. That's deliberate deception, even if it's wrapped in sarcasm. In Quran 37:89, Abraham fakes being sick to avoid a pagan festival. Even Sahih al-Bukhari 33:58 admits that Abraham lied 3 different times, including the Sarah is my sister incident from Genesis. And the Quran's Abraham stories aren't divine corrections, they're recycled folklore. The idol smashing and fiery furnace episode doesn't come from Genesis at all, it's lifted straight from Genesis Rabbah 38, a post-biblical Jewish midrash written centuries later.
The Bible claims Aaron crafted an idol for the Israelites to worship in Exodus chapter 32. The Quran, however, pins the blame on a figure called As-Samiri, portraying Aaron as a voice of reason who opposed idol worship. The Quran refuses to depict prophets as morally compromised pagan idol worshippers.
And here he manages to make things worse and prove my point. The Samaritans didn't exist until King Omri built Samaria in the 9th century BC, hundreds of years after Moses. If this is a correction, it's rewriting the Bible into a time-traveling cartoon. There are more examples. Mary is called the sister of Aaron, confusing her with Miriam, Moses' actual sister from over 1,000 years earlier, and Haman, a Persian official from the Book of Esther, is cast as Pharaoh's right-hand man, centuries out of place. Muslim apologists perform mental gymnastics to make these errors fit, but the simpler hypothesis is this. The Quran absorbed garbled traditions and local folklore and is not issuing divine corrections. It was recited orally by an illiterate caravan rider who couldn't keep the stories straight, couldn't tell the difference between apocryphal folktales and divine revelation, and thought he was the main character. His critics even called him the ear that's in the Quran, because he soaked up whatever he was told. When the Quran accuses Jews and Christians of distorting the text, it's not saying the Bible was lost or corrupted. Classical tafsir like Ibn Kathir and Katurbi make it clear the accusation is about concealment, hiding the parts Muhammad believed foretold him. He was affirming scripture he never read because he thought the entire story was about him, and he was wrong. The Islamic Dilemma still stands strong.